Reddit, what is the creepiest thing that has ever happened to you? A couple of years ago, I saw two rather large men having an argument in the street in front of my house. After a couple of minutes, they drove off and went their separate ways. I didn't think anything of it until the next day when I get a knock on my door. It turns out that one of my roommates had been sleeping with a married woman, and her husband somehow found where we lived, and was at our house with a shotgun to kill the guy who banged his wife. The dude had a couple of priors that definitely lent the threat some credibility. The man at the door was his dad, who told me that the argument was him talking his son down. He told me that he showed up as his son was getting out of the car. He asked me if I was the guy in question, and I said I wasn't. He said, "Oh, you're the roommate? He was going to kill you too." Turns out my other roommate had done some things with the young lady as well. The kicker is that I was home alone at the time. Basically, I unknowingly watched a man talk down my future murderer from my dining room window. I told this story before, but here goes. While working for forestry in Alaska, we got a call about somebody illegally dumping on the trail. Another guy and I drive out to look, didn't see anything, but came across a man crouching behind a bush watching the trail. I thought he was taking a dump at first, but we watched for a few minutes and he didn't move, so we approached. Turns out the guy I was with knew him. He was a local contractor, and called out to him by name. It was Israel Keys, who was an American serial killer from the early 90s to 2012. He actually walked with us out of the woods, said he was taking a leak. Apparently he had already killed people at that point. I always wondered if he was waiting out there for victims. I was 17 and working at my first job stocking items at a grocery store, very mundane, but it allowed for some freedom. I'd had a few run-ins with random odd people, but nothing I couldn't handle. About 2 months in, I'm shelving on the lowest level in the canned food aisle and a very tall man comes to hover over me, so close his knees are touching my back. I told myself it was a coincidence and say excuse me, and try to slide sideways out of his way, but he steps around me, trapping me. I tried a few more times to the same result when he crouches down and asks if I'd ever had a full body massage. My heart was racing and I was panicked, but like an idiot I froze up, while the guy proceeds to roughly rub my shoulders. At that moment a coworker popped her head around the corner to see how I was getting along, and surprised him. He waved a hand and goes, "Hi," like it was normal. I booked it to the back and told my manager, who in turn told security who saw him out. I wish it had ended there, but me being me, which obviously means stupid, and I was going through a major grown-up/independent streak, had myself a good cry, and then refused all offers to go home for the day. I also wanted to talk to the police when they got there. A little over an hour later, still no police, and I hear a bunch of ruckus and shouting. Then someone yelled my name. I went to investigate. It was a coworker trying to tell me to get to the back, because the guy had come back with a baseball bat, and a Rottweiler looking for me. The pair of them quickly march over to me, all the while the dog is snarling and he's saying how the dog likes me. He knew it would, I must be good with animals, and he would finish that massage back at his place. I got pinned, but my manager, one of the best women I've ever met, somehow gets herself between me and the dog. While this guy keeps commanding me to pet the dog. She stayed there holding on to me behind her back until finally the police get there. After a brief but tense standoff, he's arrested. The dog was taken to the pound. And of course, I went home. Several months later, long enough for me to all but have forgotten everything. My manager calls me into her office. She says she wanted to be there when I found out and handed me a newspaper. It took me way too long to register what was so important. The man had been arrested for murder and kidnapping. We both started crying, and I went home for the day. I couldn't handle it, and wound up leaving shortly after. I think the creepiest/scariest part was how calm he was during the whole thing. Even after the officers got there and his dog started losing its shit, he was just so very, very calm, and normal looking, like this was a normal thing. It's not paranormal, which seems to be the trend here, but this is by far the most creeped out I've ever been. I, 27F, hooked up a TV for an old man. After I finished plugging everything in, I asked him to turn it on and put on NASCAR so I could make sure the aspect ratio was right. He turns on IFC, which was playing softcore porn. He proceeded to watch it and asked me if I'd seen this movie and if I knew what it was about. There's a chick getting railed from behind on the screen and I respond with, "Yeah, I think I get the gist of it. Hey, how about that NASCAR?" He goes to the guide, and goes down a couple channels and puts on Cleveland Abduction. It's the first rape scene and he asks me if I've seen this one, and how he's seen it, and that it's really good. Then starts telling me how it's about 3 kidnapped girls kept as sex slaves. At this point I'm freaking out, texting everyone I know where I am, thinking I'm about to be raped and killed, so they at least know where to start looking for my body. He watches the entire rape scene while asking me questions about it. I just kept trying to bring up NASCAR and how I needed to get going because I had friends waiting. He agrees to change the channel but goes back to IFC softcore porn. I texted my friend, 911, call me now. She calls and I acted like she was at the hospital and I had to get there now. He finally types in the channel for NASCAR, which proved he knew what he was doing all along. I changed the aspect ratio and got the hell out of there. It was the creepiest interaction I've ever had. Not sure what his plan was, but I'm sure I really wanted no part of it. When I was 15, I went into town for my first day doing some charity work. I was early, so I sat on a bench in the town center for a bit. Someone approached me, introduced himself, and said he'd just moved here. I briefly introduced myself and we talked a bit about local stuff. He mentioned that he was 26, which weirded me out a bit. He was on his phone and suddenly, I heard the sound that a phone makes when you take a picture, and saw his camera facing me. I freaked out and demanded to know why he was taking a photo. He denied it and claimed to be taking photo of the scenery, in a market town with no scenery. Annoyed and creeped out, I just left with no explanation, and went to the charity shop where I spent 6 hours working. So, 6 hours later, I left the shop and started heading home. Suddenly I heard my name being shouted from behind me. It was the creepy guy again. I told him to leave me alone, but he wouldn't listen and said that he wouldn't let me walk home alone. I started to yell at him, telling him to go away, and I started walking faster away from him, but he kept picking up his speed to match me. He followed me pretty close for a few blocks, continuing to say weird stuff to me. However, I knew my way around this area and planned on taking a shortcut through the park back to my house. Once I got near the park, I booked it down the shortcut I knew, and started screaming and yelling that a man was following me home. That seemed to work because when I looked back, the guy was nowhere to be seen. I was extremely thankful that I was able to make it home safe that night. When I was in university, I moved into an apartment by myself and needed my internet and TV hooked up. The TV guy came over to hook everything up and was a little chatty, but generally seemed nice. I hate having strangers in my place, so I wasn't very chatty back and he didn't stick around. The next day, I was just getting out of the shower and my apartment buzzer kept ringing. When I answered it, a guy was like, "Hi, I'm here from Shaw. You just had TV and internet installed yesterday and I'm here to just make sure it's all working correctly." I was just wearing a towel and was really weirded out because it was working fine, and nobody had told me there was going to be a follow-up appointment. So I lied and said, "Sorry, I have a bunch of people over right now. It's not a good time." Then I called Shaw and asked if they sent someone over and they said that they did not. It really freaked me out. I was driving to hockey practice one early morning with my teammate, around 4 to 5 a.m., a couple of years ago, and had a green light at a major intersection. All of a sudden I see a lady completely clad in a white dress, with snow white hair, and super pale, just appear in front of me, so I stopped and all of a sudden, a dump truck fully loaded with dirt and rocks blew through the stoplight and kept going. After I gathered myself together, I looked for the lady and she was gone. Teammate asked me why I decided to stop at the green light, and I told him about the lady and he said, "What lady?" I explained what I saw, and she had to be a ghost or a guardian angel. If she didn't appear, we both would have been dead. I will never forget this. I had a detached retina at a young age and had to have surgery to repair it. The surgery ended up being around 7 hours long. I remember waking up in the middle of surgery and seeing the reflection off the monitor above me of the medical team working on my eye. I didn't feel any pain, just the complete awareness of the surgery being performed. I remember someone placing their hand firmly on my forehead and saying, "He woke up, prepare another dose." Someone else came into the picture and I went cold again and fell asleep. The creepy part is each anniversary of the surgery I have night terrors and generally wake up screaming, drenched in sweat. I hate that night cause no matter what I do, my body recalls the surgery. I always wake up dreaming that someone is performing surgery on me, but I am strapped down. This happened years ago, but still sticks in my memory. I come from a rather superstitious family. My grandaunt was thought to be sensitive to spirits and whatnot, and would often get possessed. Today, I'm quite sure she simply had some mental issues. Anyway, one day she was in the kitchen chopping vegetables. I must have been about 10 at the time. I went in to rinse a glass for some orange juice. She would have standing next to me, maybe a couple of feet away. I was, naturally, a little afraid of her, so I didn't start any conversation or even look at her while I was washing my glass. All I could hear was the chop 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 of her knife. And then suddenly the sound stopped. I assumed she was simply done with the veggies, but I had this horrible feeling that something else was going on. I turned to look at her and she was just glaring at me with wide open eyes and this extreme expression of hate. Just glaring. I bolted out of the kitchen and ran to my other relatives, telling them what happened. I can't really remember what happened next because I basically blanked out. She passed away a few years later. Not sure of what exactly, and I never asked. I just feel sad that the family never really addressed her issues medically, and instead assumed she was under some paranormal influence. This story happened when I was 18, in college, and living with my boyfriend in our first apartment. He had left for an early class and I had the day off, so I was sleeping in. I awoke to a man I didn't know sitting on the end of my bed staring at me. When he saw me wake up, he said, "It's time to get up now," and just kept looking at me. I was trying to figure out if I was awake or dreaming and if there was anything I could do to avoid getting raped and murdered. He just kept sitting and looking. I figured out I was awake and also remembered that I was sleeping naked, so I didn't want to get up unless he made a move. After what felt like a lifetime of silence, but was probably only a minute, he said it again. "It's time to get up now," I said, "Okay," still too shocked and scared to figure out that I could ask him who he was or tell him to leave or start screaming for help. He got up and walked out of the room and I heard voices in my kitchen. He left my bedroom door open when he left, so I still didn't want to get up because of the naked thing. After a few minutes I built up the courage to wrap a blanket around myself, grab some clothes, and dash to the bathroom. As I passed the door I saw him standing in the kitchen doorway and just staring into my room, watching me run for the bathroom. I sat there, shaking, and scared for my life with the bathroom door locked for the next 15 minutes. While I was sitting there, I could hear the men walking around my house and talking about what they wanted to take. The man who woke me up eventually came to the bathroom door, and started banging on it and yelling for me to come out. This was the most scared I had ever been in my life, and I couldn't do anything but hope and pray that my boyfriend got home soon. That's when I heard one of the men yell, "Oh shit. We gotta go." And they all ran out the front door. Turns out, my boyfriend had just gotten home and one of them must have seen the headlights come through the window from outside. We live on the first floor of the apartment building. Needless to say, that was the scariest night of my life, and I am so thankful for my boyfriend coming home when he did. When my little brother was 3, one day he just started talking about his other home, along with his other family. He would describe his other home with very specific details, down to the curtain color and what the windows looked like. Some of the things he described were things he's never even seen before. He would also tell us lots of stories about his other mom, who he called Chuty, and the rest of his other family. This lasted for a year and then he just stopped talking about it. Him talking about having another house and family wasn't really the creepy thing. It was more that he was giving us such a vivid, detailed description involving things he shouldn't have even known about. We asked him about it a year or two ago, when he was 9 or 10, he's 12 now, we're 11 years apart in age, and he told us he doesn't remember saying or thinking about any of it. I get the sense that he thinks we made it up just to fuck with him. It was just really bizarre all around. Everything he described about his other house and family was realistic, which is what really freaked us out. And the fact he babbled on and on about it daily for a year, but doesn't remember any of it. He never even tapered off, which was almost weirder. He went from talking about it all the time, every day, for a whole year, and then just stopped, never mentioning it again. It's almost like he was being taken to a different house every night and returned before morning so no one would notice. I haven't seen it, but I know there's a documentary about a kid who did this exact thing. Not only that, but they took him to the house and found everything he had said, which he could never have known was true. I'm also sure his other home was in some other country. He was only young but described everything, and they found the records of a past family which he said was his, including neighbors. Again, I haven't seen it, I just remember people I know talking about it, and even though I don't believe in that stuff myself, I keep meaning to find and watch it. When I was about 12 to 13 years old, I was waiting for my friends at the entrance to a large park in my city. While I waited, a van pulled up and a guy rolled down his window and asked me, "What are you up to?" To which I replied, "Waiting for my friends," as I paced back and forth slightly away from the van with each step. He said, "Where they coming from?" And I answered, "From the metro," and he said, "Hop in, I can give you a lift there." Well, at this point I know he's a creeper, so I told him, "No, thanks," and began to walk away, while he insisted I accept his lift. I left the park entrance and he pulled into the parking lot, did a U-turn, and drove out of the park along the road I was walking on. Having noticed what he was doing early on, I walked really fast to a hole in the fence of the park and climbed in. From that point he'd have to do a 8 to 10 minute drive to get back to where I was. Met up with my friends a little bit later and told them the story. I worked at a campground over the summer and I agreed to do security watch on the Tuesday after Labor Day. It's completely empty all day long and we spent most of the day cleaning and repairing various items in the campground. It was also a family campground with tons of things to do like zip lining, paintballing, go-karting, and hiking. It was relatively large, approximately 50 square acres. Anyways, I'm doing security, which mostly consists of driving around in a golf cart and making sure people aren't doing anything. That night, a motion sensor went off on the upper loop, which had been out of use since July for renovations. Usually when a motion sensor goes off, it's a raccoon or a deer, but we have to check anyways. I make my way up to the motion sensor, which was going off constantly on my way up, and logged it on our notebook. When I got up there was this fucking lady's voice singing in the middle of the night. I walk around and head towards it. Bad idea, there was this 40-something meth head in a dress walking around singing. She saw me and chased after me. I ran as fast as I could to the golf cart and took off down to the main office. I called the police, but they were going to be close to an hour. I stayed locked up in the office until they got there. She paced around the front door and screamed at me the whole time. When they got there, they arrested her and we went up to the same loop where she was to look for more. I swear, looking for more meth heads was more terrifying than being chased by her. She had been living in one of the yurts we had yet to get to for over 2 months. She looked like a witch. The yurt was destroyed and we ended up burning it down. My girlfriend was in an accident, which demolished her car. After the accident, we stored the car in our driveway with a tarp covering it until the insurance towed it. She was in Canada for a convention, which left me and the dogs alone at home for the weekend. When I got home from work, I thought it was a good idea to call my parents to catch up. The wind was intense that day and blew the tarp off of the passenger side of the car. As I am speaking with my parents, I decide to pull the tarp back over the car. I'm talking with my parents and listening to them describe their day when I hear a faint voice saying, "Hey." I have no idea where it is coming from until I look down. There is a man sitting in my car. I have never seen this man before, but he looks at me and asks, "Where's Dan and Isaac?" Now, I don't know either of those people and I told him that I did not. I can see he has all of the personal items from the car in his lap. I start telling him that he needs to get out of the car and leave. Then I see the pepper spray in his hands, which was left by my girlfriend. I knew at that moment that my day would end with being pepper sprayed. So I tell my parents to call the cops. He steps out of the car asking, "Where is the ice?" I just tell him that he has the wrong place and grab the CD case out of his hands. He reaches for the pepper spray and I back up. He stops and says, "I'll be back, bro. Just you watch." I watch him walk off and for a brief moment he starts yelling at a tree down the street. The cops came and he was found up the road, but the officers could not find my stuff. The experience definitely freaked me out for the rest of the night. I remember sitting watching TV, feeling a bit tired, but tried to stay awake to finish my show. Next thing I know, I wake up in another room, and my pants were gone. I tried to get up, but I fell down. Both my feet and legs were asleep. I laid there for a while, trying to figure out how I got to the other room. Eventually I was able to walk, and found out it was now 8 a.m. I was watching TV at about 10 p.m. last night. I don't know, part of me thinks I was molested by aliens or something. Never blacked out before or lost a memory. I was in Portland, Oregon about 6 months ago for training at work. A bunch of coworkers and I went out drinking the last night we were there. They ended up going home before me and I found myself trying to find my way home around 3:30 a.m. with a dead phone. There is a large homeless population in Portland, many of which I pass sleeping on the sidewalk under shop entrances. At one point, I come across a bus stop, and what appears to be a little old woman bent over looking for something in her purse. I ask her if she knows which direction my hotel is in and she whirls around and I notice her teeth are rotting and they look as if they were sharpened at the end, most likely from the decay. She had leathery tan skin, frizzy white hair, and these terrifying light blue eyes that were opened as wide as they would go. She lets out a scream at the top of her lungs, not like a scared scream, but like a terrifying witch scream, and says, "Don't go down that road back there, there's a man with a knife and he's not a good person. Don't go down there, don't go, he is bad." She just stands there wide-eyed, repeating that over and over, yelling at my face. I listened for about 5 seconds before I took off the other direction about to shit my pants. I looked back about a block away and she was still there yelling to me. Most terrifying encounter I've ever experienced. If you guys like this video, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe. Also check out my Instagram account, Scary Time, that is linked in the description. And as always, stay scary.